All right, welcome back to the BoxOut Podcast. Thank you for joining us for episode 2. Again, I'm your host, Marco Trimboli, also lead performance coach at BoxOut Performance. And today I am glad to welcome Lucas Ginevro. Thank you for coming, Lucas.
Thank you for having me on. Excited to join you on this podcast episode number 2.
It's awesome, man. And you can see we got some new swag with the BoxOut masks. Lucas, tell us a little bit about yourself to get the audience familiar with who you are and what you do.
So I am a student at the Schulich School of Business. I'm going into my second year in September. I am one of 4 summer interns at BoxOut for the summer. It's been a great experience. I've greatly enjoyed it, and basically getting ready to get back to school.
That's awesome. And tell me a little bit of something outside of school that someone wouldn't know about Lucas. Like, what do you like? What's an interesting fact about yourself that you can tell us?
I think one that I told you pretty early on was my experience with piano. That I've played the piano my whole life. I last year got my grade 10 certification from the RCM, and it's been a lifelong love of mine that I've been doing for about 15 years now.
That's awesome. I like music too. I'll be honest, I'm not that good at playing any instruments. The one thing I do is I do sing. I've always wanted to play the guitar, but I'll be honest, I'm never good at that. So that's something maybe you can teach me a couple of things with piano, guitar, with your background. So you mentioned earlier there, Schulich and back to school soon. So the reason for this podcast, this segment, this episode, is to kind of teach everyone and educate everyone in the sense of BoxOut learnings of what we do and how it kind of resonates as everyday life things, scenarios like communication skills, learning as taking in information, as well as routines and comfort levels and stuff like that. So this is what we wanted to get you in. Being first year, you just completed your first year. This is your second year, and the kind of things that you are doing to prepare for the new school semester. So if you can kind of give us a little bit about information about that.
Mm-hmm.
Just again, this is your time to shine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think kind of before we get into that, it's definitely been a different kind of looking forward to this year. It's definitely been different from looking forward to any year in the past. Just the nature of kind of everything being different. For me, school being online in the fall, going back into it through virtually, like the way I finished last year. I know a lot of the majority of university and post-secondary students are kind of going down that path. And then I know that at the elementary and high school levels, most people are going back to school, but kind of in a different way. It's a lot more separated, and a lot more has been put in place than normal, obviously. So I think it definitely goes without saying, but I think it's an important point that preparation this year is definitely different from any year in the past, as we're kind of adapting to this new world that we all kind of got to get accustomed to it. So I think that's a key thing that I think might get forgotten a little bit, but must be kind of kept in mind, because we're still kind of living in this COVID world, and we're doing our best to make the best of it. To your question, I think one thing that I always make sure to do in this next little bit of time, as we're now as we're a couple of weeks away from the return to school, I think one of the biggest things that I always make sure to do is to take care of all my purchases now. Purchases before the first day, especially now that store hours are a lot more compressed. Plus, obviously the online option is a lot more attractive now. But yeah, this goes in any year. Always make sure to get that taken care of before the first day, because I always find once school starts, you're in it, and you're kind of it's you're focused on that, and that becomes your biggest priority, and you don't really want to be focusing on buying your books and buying your supplies after a couple of days of school. And I think so getting everything done in advance, I think one thing that really helps you is just to kind of mentally prepared and not overwhelmed right from the beginning. You know you're ready to go. You know you have everything you need for the first day, and you can kind of move forward from there. I think another thing is it allows you to manage your expenses, and I think that's a very important thing for especially people at the post-secondary level when it's kind of you're managing your own money and that. And I think it's very important that you ensuring that you know how much you're spending and kind of take care of it all. I know it can be annoying to buy textbooks, but it's ultimately unavoidable. So I think managing your expenses is a great thing that it allows you to do by taking care of this now, just before you actually get started and you're focused on your courses. And ultimately, I think the last thing anybody wants is to, have homework or have a reading in a course that they don't even have a book for. And I'm not going to lie, I somewhat fell into that trap in first year this past year, just because I was very, nervous about everything and wasn't sure about how everything would go. But ultimately, definitely a learning experience. I definitely corrected that come second term. So, and definitely not something that I would want to happen again.
No, that's key. Like it's good to always be prepared for any situation that arises, and especially now since a lot of people were out of that routine because school ended in March last year, so that was like a 6 months hiatus for a lot of people. Where now it's getting back into that kind of consistent routine for most. Like you mentioned, you said a couple key words there, adaptability and stuff, but it's going to be an interesting school year. Like I'm excited to see what happens. I'm not going to school, but just for like yourself and others who are going there, it's going to be an interesting new way to see how people are going to deal with the new normal.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's because one thing you're saying, being prepared, managing expenses, getting stuff ahead of time. How about courses? Like what courses are you taking again? Like
mostly business related. I have in first semester 3 business courses that for me at least are like within the Schulich, and then 2 non-business electives that I had. So that's what my first semester looks like. And I think that kind of leads me to another thing that make sure that I'm able to do, just because I was able to answer your question. I make sure to look over my courses, and just consider. I think the first thing I make sure to do like this time, like late August, is just consider any switches, because I know it's a lot easier now than in 3 or 4 weeks from now when everyone's in their classes and all set up to go. I think it's obviously a lot easier now. Classes aren't as full, and I have time to consider. I think that's the other thing. Like, I'm not swamped with readings and homework in my courses. So I think that's definitely one thing. That's kind of the biggest thing, I think, when looking over courses. Considering any switches, for me, I'm not really considering that this year, but I know in years past, especially in high school, it was definitely something that I was considering. So I think it was very important that I did it over the summer. I do it over the summer as opposed to kind of going into the first week or two when courses are a lot more full and deadlines are pretty close at that point to switching. And otherwise, if that's not on the table, then I think it's still worth looking over your courses to just really get to know what the course material will look like. Obviously, you don't need to study like it's an exam, but it'd be very helpful to know what the first couple classes will look like, because don't we do that before every class? But why not try that before the first one as well? Mm-hmm. We do our readings, we do our homework to prepare for classes, but there's a first class, so why not prepare for that as well? And having that pre-knowledge of a course will also help you feel very mentally prepared, especially in a course you've never taken before, because you'll kind of get rid of those jitters that always come from taking a course that in an area that you're not really sure about and you've never done before. But even if it's a course that you've kind of taken along that course stream, obviously every course is different, so still worth doing, still worth looking over, just so you have some kind of knowledge going in there on the first day or week.
Yeah, so typically, in what I'm getting from your answers here is you typically like to be as prepared as possible for anything,
For sure.
for anything that arises, and you know you're not the only one. A lot of people want to be that preparation in anything, whether it's school, life, work, sports, whatever the case may be. Everyone wants to have that preparation. But the thing is, again, is like not everything goes as planned. And we all learned that there's never that. It's always, everyone thinks it's that straight line, but there's always going to be a turn or a curve or a bump of some sort, and that's stuff that we got to overcome. And that's what we said at the beginning, how these learning is everyday life situations kind of correlates with mental development.
Yeah,
as you know, right? And this is the whole reason why we want to do these podcasts, these segments, is to educate and talk to people and show them about, hey, everyone thinks it's easy to do this, but if just like yourself, you're saying you want to do all this, be as prepared as possible, but seeing as you're picking these courses, and then the course is filled up, right? And then now you got to relook everything, think everything over, and come to a new decision. And that's where a lot of people have to realize where that's a part of mental toughness, adaptability, stuff like that, right? Because if I were to ask you what mental toughness is about, I'll get different answers from everybody. But if you were to give me your kind of definition of mental toughness, what can you tell me what mental toughness is?
To me, I think it's the ability to overcome challenges and ultimately not give up. I think that's where the mental part of it comes into play. And work to overcome challenges.
Yep. And like I say, I've asked, me, I do a lot of meetings with people, a lot of it like conversations with people, and I get a different definition each time. And I never say anyone's wrong in giving the definition, but a part of mental toughness is about sticking with those routines no matter what. Even when things are seeming like hopeless, or you seem just so out of it, like you just are tired like that, is if you have a schedule, if you have a plan, if you have that routine intact, you stick with it no matter what.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's the key to mental toughness. One example I can give you for a personal thing with myself is when it comes to working out. We have our schedule. We want to work out 5 times a week, right? We work out. Then the next week, oh, I'm tired, I'm lazy. I'll just do it tomorrow. I'll just do it tomorrow. When we keep putting it off, that is a part of our mental toughness. Kind of just give it up.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's about being consistent with your routines and daily schedules, or weekly or monthly, whatever the case may be. And one thing that helps me is writing down on paper. A lot of people just talk about it or just put it in their phone, whatever the case may be. I personally just write it down in my journal or my BoxOut booklet there that we all have. Because seeing it and reading it holds myself accountable.
Yeah.
And which is key about that. So that's a little bit about the mental toughness there. And you can even think about it like mental toughness when it goes about going back to school.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
For sure, yeah.
If you can kind of give me like a little bit example for yourself about getting back to school, how it kind of correlates with that.
I think the biggest thing with that kind of correlating to mental toughness as a student, I think is something that I look to do every late August or so before I go back, and that's plan. And a lot of times I know my timetable. I think that's pretty set unless I'm looking for a switch, but otherwise it's relatively set one way or the other. More times than not, either prior to or on the first week, I know what my where my assignments are and tests and exams are going to lie within the semester. And I think as you mentioned, putting that all in your calendar right from the start allows you to know what weeks are going to know what your weeks are going to look like all throughout your year or your term. And that's important because you don't want to be working on a day-to-day or week-to-week schedule. You want to be thinking in the long term as well. And that's something I learned in first year. Like a lot of assignments and a lot of exams, and I feel like everyone realizes this at some point in time. It just depends on your, academic journey and what kind of course you take, what program you're in, and kind of like what the demand is. But I've kind of learned in first year about how everyone says, never study the night before.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes not starting 3 nights before is not enough either. Sometimes you need many days or even weeks to get assignments done and study for your exams. And I think that's where this planning comes into play, because without planning, it could be easy to not know you have an assignment due until 2 weeks before. But the expectation is you've been working on it all throughout the month.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is an even bigger thing in group work, when if your group wants to get going on something early, you got to be part of that. But and so having that preparation and knowing that you're given an assignment on September 10th, let's say, and you're going to be starting on that soon after, I think that's what allows for group work to be successful, when everyone's on that same page. So doing your part in that, planning everything out beforehand, is very key, especially when you're working with others, and all students are doing that at least to some extent.
Yeah, and that's key. Like, even like you mentioned in the group thing, even though you don't, and it sucks, but when you're in a group thing and you have to finish a project of some sort, and even though you don't agree with the timing and stuff like that, that's something that we still got to overcome, and put the pedal to the metal, so to say.
For sure.
And that, again, is a part of the mental toughness. Now, allowing that stuff to affect us. Because if we allow that to affect us, then our mental toughness is going to just drop.
For sure.
And then it's going to affect our performance in the school, or whatever the case may be, when it comes to what we need to perform in. It can be school,
Absolutely.
sports, music, life in general, like we talked about,
Yeah.
right? So that's good. How about sports? What did you play sports growing up? Do you have what's your favorite sport?
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell me?
Played a little bit of hockey. Kind of more so followed the musical path, and I also did a little bit of karate, or I did quite a bit of karate actually as well.
Oh, wow.
I was 2 or 3 years ago. I was able to achieve my black belt. So
Congratulations! That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
That's awesome.
haven't kept up with that too much, but definitely a big part of my early teenage years.
Wow, so karate, hockey, and music. So out of all those ones, what is your your all time kind of go to? I would say music. Knowing you for this little bit that I know, I would say music. But if you had to pick a sport, whatever the sport may be, even if you play or just enjoy watching, what is your go to sport?
Probably hockey. I played it a little bit. I obviously actively watch it as well, and yeah, definitely been
I
part
know
of my life
this.
in that sense. Sorry?
I said I know this, but the fans don't. Who's your hockey team?
I'm a very proud fan of the Boston Bruins. Big series win yesterday, and yeah, on to the second round for us now.
So for every Toronto fan out there, I apologize ahead of time. No, and we've had these conversations about the Bruins, and I told them how much I respect that team because of the work ethic they have, to just accomplish so much, right? Even with the whole Tuukka Rask thing opting out this year too, that team has still come together to perform.
Absolutely. It's been crazy.
Winning this big series against Carolina, next round. But that just shows you about mental toughness in professional sports, right? Where it just kind of correlates. These big name players are faced to be away from their families, to be away from all this, but continue to overcome all this kind of adversity, sort of say, and it ties in with grit and everything, to perform at the highest level and continue to stick to those routines. Even though, a lot of them are being affected by, like I mentioned, staying away from their family, injuries, friends opting out, like Tuukka Rask, they're still overcoming all that. And you kind of see that correlation, how it fits in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now I think back to the game on Monday night. they were playing terrible through 2.5 periods, down, getting shut out by James Reimer, and the Hurricanes had scored 2 goals that I thought Halak could have had, and it looked like, I remember thinking, well, it's going to be 2-2, best of 3 now, and hopefully it doesn't go to a game 7, because who knows what happens in game 7s, but sure enough, all it took was 1, then everyone started playing hard, and I think that's what kind of turned it around for all of us, not to mention without a Pasternak too in that game.
Oh, yeah. And we're all familiar with James Reimer not comfortable with leads against the Bruins.
Yeah.
So when I saw that 2-0 lead, or when they were up, it was a 2 or 3 they were up?
2.
2.
You know, we scored 4.
Yeah, I'm just like, this is James Reimer's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Like that guy can't, poor guy, like had that. And it was in the third period as well, too, I think.
10 minutes left, I think.
10 minutes left, so it's the same kind of scenario. 10 minutes left when they were up 4-1, and then they lost 5-4 when they were with the Leafs.
Yeah, 4
and I was just like, this guy, I think what they got to start doing is pull him 10 minutes in with that lead, and then bringing the backup, right?
Maybe, yeah.
But no, like we were just joking around, but you can see how they overcome. They stick to their play, they stick to their game plan. Yeah, they got to make some adjustments, but majority of the time they're sticking to their consistent game plans and schedules and just to get the job done. Because we know it's a competitive league. We know everyone's playing to win, especially the Stanley Cup. But the difference maker to me is to overcoming those challenges.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
To get the job done, like not. And there's so many different aspects that can come into this. Composure can be a big part, like the emotions, and performing under pressure is huge, right?
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
again, it all starts with I would say personally with mental toughness.
That's personally my
perspective with that. So moving on with that, so we got into the sports, school, back to that. Again, I'm not that much of a music advocate. Like I listen to all types of music. I like to sing. I want to learn how to play guitar, everything possible. But if you could kind of give us and myself some ways it works with music, what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, no, I think from my experience playing piano, it's so much of it comes from just your determination and your will. Like I think just kind of a learning experience I had with learning about BoxOut traits and kind of all that through the last couple months. So when we talk about the mental aspect of, let's say, piano, for example, or of sport, or of another instrument, of violin, let's say, of anything, honestly.
Yep.
The common misconception that I fell into as well, and a lot of people who I've spoken to fell into this too, is the thinking is the mental aspect of piano is just, how does your brain work? How does your brain influence how you're playing? Is your brain able to respond? Is it able to, we like to call the cognitive traits. And that's obviously a huge part in it, but in reality, kind of learning about everything from BoxOut, including psychology traits such as mental toughness, has made me realize how that's such an important part of what we're doing and what I've been doing my whole life in piano, for example, and how that's a key part. That's arguably the biggest part of the mental aspect of piano. That's such a kind of misconception normally. I think, for example, like so much of it is so much of piano that I find separates each level of musician from the good from the great from the amazing, and the amazing from the world class and world renowned, is execution of many important but small details. And I think so much of that comes from how badly do you want to make sure you get all the details. How important is getting, maybe I'm getting a bit technical here, but how important is on the third line making sure your left hand is silent? How important is that to you? Or are you okay if your left hand is moderately loud? Does it matter to you or does it not? And I think so much of that comes from mental toughness and just your desire to want to get everything correct and desire to want to make sure it looks good. It looks good and it's played out the exact way it should be because there's so many fine details that separates each level of musician in my mind.
It's just to chime in there a little bit there, and I think a lot of the things that you're mentioning there, I see to a lot of people is, and this is a good thing about what we do at BoxOut, is how getting the measurements, getting these baselines to find out where people stand is, a lot of the things that you're mentioning there is, it's like saying, do you want to be mediocre? Are you okay with things compensating for other things? Or do you want to be the best version that you can be by knowing where you're, and again, we don't call anything weaknesses, we call them all areas of opportunity, where we can improve these areas of opportunity of yours to just help you be more well-rounded. And just hearing you talk about that's what just resonated with me. But yeah, it's just sort of cut you off, but keep going with that because I like where you were going with that and how it kind of resonates with, like you said, with the mental toughness. You'll overcome and bounce back and do whatever possible to improve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what you mentioned there was very kind of on point with what I was saying. And I think when you talk about does someone want to be mediocre or push themselves to the next level, I think biggest thing in the arts is a lot of people's mental toughness can be measured with where they see the next level being. Mm-hmm. Here's what I mean by that. Everyone, in my opinion, with piano, I say this a lot, everyone can play the notes. Everyone can.
Yeah.
And to some people, that's good enough, and that's success to them. And I think they may not be settling for mediocrity. They're perceiving what they think is good. Mm-hmm. What is adequate enough to progress to the next level. And I think that's where mental toughness comes into play. I think also, and this is related too, I think all the arts, I'm kind of just speaking on music because of my experience, it can very easily wear you down just because of how much thinking you're doing, and it's very active thinking as well. Like you're very on the spot. You're very you're acting upon a lot of things. Like you're physically playing the notes, so it's physical. Plus, it can mentally wear you down because you're thinking a lot as well. But I think your capability to push through that is also part of your mental toughness because it can wear you down very easily just because of the nature of the complexity of it. Mm-hmm. But your capability of getting through that is also a indicator of mental toughness as well.
No, that was really well said. I like how you worded that, to be honest. And that's key. And like we said, we did it from the school perspective, we did it from the sports perspective, we did it from the life perspective, and we did it from the arts perspective. But there's just so much more. You can do it in any way possible, right? Because it's just who we are as a person. And I say this all the time. It doesn't matter if we're a teacher, student, coach, player, doctor, whatever the case may be, we are all human beings.
Yes.
And I say that first and foremost to everyone, to be honest. So if we had to do take away from this session today, this segment, which I truly enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed it as well, to be honest.
Sure, I did.
I really loved the way you were speaking and
Thank you.
Comfortable. So yeah, if we had to take this away, so going back to school, we know there's a lot of stress on a lot of people's parents too, especially because the thing that I see a lot of is no one knows if they want to send their kids back or not.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a lot of back and forth with that. And just even these teachers, to be honest, are not really that comfortable going back.
No, yeah.
And I don't blame them.
No, I don't either.
And I don't blame any of this. So this is what I'm saying, where we gotta overcome this adversity, sort of say these unfortunate circumstances, and apply ourselves to be prepared for it. And like you see, being as prepared as possible if things do end up going back. Buying products like you were mentioning, right? Like the school supplies.
Yeah.
Again, it's been a while since I've been in school, but
your textbooks as well.
Textbooks as well.
Taking care of all that for sure.
But one thing I'll say, did you want to say anything else before we signed off or anything? I was gonna say personally, my perspective on why mental toughness is so important is pretty much because of what we all deal with, and everyone in the world deals with this, is setbacks.
Yeah, for sure.
Everybody deals with setbacks, and it's key to come back from those as quickly as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a big part of mental toughness. But until we know where we are in that, how do we know if we're high or low?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So that's basically, I would say, a big thing to take from all this is people can talk, and hopefully, nothing bad happens from the conversation, stuff like that. But as much as people talk about, there's no action being done.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And that's where we got to start overcoming, and that's why we're doing as much action as possible with these podcasts, but also with the education to get them to come see what it's all about, just from an education process, right?
No, absolutely.
So again, Lucas, if there's anything you want to chime off on a last minute.
I think, just kind of one thing of how I've kind of drawn the connection after kind of studying the mental toughness trait in particular and kind of my everyday life. So I know I'm filled with expertise on piano here, but I think I drew a pretty clear correlation to last summer when I was practicing for my grade 10 exam. And I think I knew mental toughness was a key part of getting through it. It was clear. I think I was having 5, 6, 7, 8 hour days of practicing, depending on the day, depending on everything else, but it was needed. There was no way around it. I had to really put in work to make sure that my exam was going to be done well in August. And truth is, it wasn't even that great, but it was good enough to get me by. I knew I was relying on mental toughness every day to overcome the challenges, the stressors of my lesson, and really just push through to get to getting better at the end of each day, week, month, and ultimately to a good performance. But having not known about BoxOut, I didn't know how to ensure that I was mentally tough, that I was getting better at it. I was just told, or I was either being told by someone else or telling myself, you just have to tough it out. You have to mentally hang in there, and all the sayings I'm sure you've heard more than I have, to be honest with you. But it was like, how do I do that? And the answer was practice. Get better. Make sure you're better. And unless I could see or hear something, or my teacher signed off on something, I didn't know I was getting better.
Yeah, that famous saying, practice makes perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll go on. Sorry.
And even perfect practice makes perfect. Like we've tried to change the saying a bit, but it's like there's still kind of that missing gap here of just needing the misconception that I had to go through all summer of just working harder, just more hours, more. I wanted to push myself, and my way of pushing myself even beyond my teacher's expectations was doing more hours. Not anything else, just doing more hours of piano. And yeah, that helped, but there's not but how was I supposed to exemplify mental toughness? How was I supposed to really push myself other than just practicing? So I think a lot of society, if you will, is kind of stuck in, and I was too, this misconception of mental toughness just being practice more, just figure it out. You know what I mean? And I think that's such a missing gap in learning.
And that's the thing, and I say it too, is a lot of people, again, without knowing where someone is or where someone stands, is they're ultimately guessing.
Yep.
And what they're trying to push on people is basically what they want or how they want to be taught.
Yeah.
And that's where I notice, with my time being here and even my time in the past, is it was always, just do this, keep doing this, keep doing this, keep doing this. This is how you gotta do it. And remember, this is how we all learn differently. We all have, take information in different ways. But like you mentioned, there's more to just practice. It is important to stick to those teams, but there's so much more in depth to that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm glad how you correlated that with the music and your expertise and your learning growing up. And I'm glad you learned something with being a part of us
For sure.
for this long. So again, man, I really appreciate you coming out.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
It was an honor to have you. We'll have more of this up
For sure.
On our YouTube channel. 2 episodes. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. If there's anything you want to hear more of or what you think, just leave a comment on our Instagram or YouTube. More interns, more guests like Lucas will come. Lucas will be back as well. And thanks again, Lucas, and thank you all for listening to our second episode for BoxOut Podcast. Take care.